About a month ago, Schaffrillas Productions made a video on Kid Icarus Uprising, and how much of an underrated masterpiece it is. And I gotta be honest. Great video. Thanks for giving the best 3DS game the attention it deserves and highlighting its best qualities. But I still did have a few problems with it. I thought that the whole cutscene fatigue point was odd, given that Schaffrillas is one of over 9,000 people that says Persona 5 was their favorite game of the last decade. And Schaffrillas himself says that it's very visual novel-esque, so I don't know what's up with that. He also mentions how Brawl's story mode doesn't have any character arcs despite the fact that But something that caught my interest the most was when he asked if Nintendo characters have compelling personalities, claiming that some of them either haven't been all fleshed out that much, or can only be summarized in one word. I was very worried if he was gonna throw shade at Nintendo for not being artistic with their most popular franchises, inevitably going through the same song and dance that I've heard from pretty much every popular movie reviewing YouTuber ever, where they go on this monotonous monologue about how kids' movies have been artistic before, so every kids' movie must be artistic. And because of this, I'm throwing all of the shade at Illumination, as well as modern Disney and Pixar. Okay, Boomer. Look, I don't mean to brag, but I'm still gonna brag about how media studies, one of my 3 majors, goes over multiple aspects of movie making as a whole. Yes, I did say 3 majors, and you would know that if you followed me on Twitter. Sure, Illumination movies do suck, but that's not because of their lack of art.
Nobody cares!
To those who may not have realized it yet, Nintendo's fundamental philosophy when making games is that good gameplay comes first, and they've made it obvious multiple times. They believe that making political statements is for other game developers to do. Nintendo just wants to make people smile and have fun, because if a game's not fun, why bother? That said, Nintendo also makes a decent amount of games with more traditional storytelling that can be considered artistic or deep, including with the likes of Kid Icarus Uprising. But even then, Nintendo still believes that good gameplay is prioritized first. And Gordon Jamesies does acknowledge this. But something that he doesn't seem to understand is that a lot of the deeper lore pieces and personality traits in Nintendo games are secretly woven into many places in a game where you wouldn't even think to look. In Shaif's defense, I can't blame him for not knowing this. It's not even being extremely subtle that goes over a typical viewer's head. But sometimes the game's lore is too subtle for even big brains to notice. But if you decide to take the time to analyze your average Nintendo game, you'd see that Nintendo's most iconic characters have several aspects to their personalities, and many of them can be told through simple character design, subtle hints in cutscenes and lore pieces, and even through normal gameplay. So, to answer Schaffrillas' question, do Nintendo characters have compelling personalities? Yes. Yes, they do. Something that successful game companies like Nintendo have frequently excelled at is character design. Now the question, what makes a good character design, is not only subjective, but incredibly convoluted. I say convoluted because of how a lot of character designers like to experiment and possibly challenge certain fundamentals of character design. Like how supposedly, red is a color of edginess, or anger! But then Mario's out here all happy and jolly, wahoo! But the way that I see things, a good character design should tell you everything you need to know about a character just by looking at them. I also feel that the world around the character contributes to the design as well. To begin with, what is Mario? Mario games are very colorful, the enemies are goofy, the music is poppy, and the goal is to get from point A to point B. A very simple goal for simple people. Now, let's ask a new question. What is Mario? Well, by paying attention to how Mario acts in the games, as well as how he's often portrayed in his renders, we can tell that he's happy, confident, and easygoing. A relatively simple character for simple people. But, by looking deeper and analyzing some of the game's cutscenes, as well as Mario's behaviors and reactions to stuff, we can tell that Mario still cares about his friends and his brother Luigi, who he occasionally likes to tease to the point of being considered a sociopath. Oh, shut up, you know that's not true. But let's look at some of the other characters in the Mario games, or at least those in the same universe. Mario's lover, Peach, isn't just your token damsel in distress, usually, but she's actually more of a pacifist than anything, choosing to focus her efforts on expanding her kingdom, albeit not one with at least a security system and proper army to defend it. Maybe if she had one, the Mushroom Kingdom wouldn't look so different in every game. Plus, I feel like the naturally peaceful nature of the Mushroom Kingdom contributes to her personality as well. Maybe she doesn't have a security system because she'd rather just have people enjoy living in the kingdom. Also, as of Mario Odyssey's ending, I am convinced that Peach is a fucking tease! And her relationship with Mario is purely platonic at best, but Mario is either too gullible or too stupid to understand that. But that's merely a modest proposal. A modest proposal related to a media form that you can play. I give you gratitude for taking the time to watch. As for Mario's nemesis, Bowser did initially start off as just some monster, but in many of the other games, such as the Mario RPGs, and even a few of the mainline platformers, Bowser is expressed as being kind of a tryhard. He's still as powerful as ever, but he's also arrogant, dim-witted, cocky, smart-mouthed, and egocentric. But at the same time, Bowser is a loving father and a hopeless romantic. I'd use this as a case for why Bowser's the most fleshed out main character in the Mario series, but then again, we are missing one more character. Luigi is not only timid, I'd argue that the better word to use would be jittery. But deep down, he wants to earn respect from his brother. This isn't much, but then again, these are usually the only traits seen in the games that star Mario and just happen to feature Luigi. When the game has Luigi as the main character, you start to see some clearer differences between Green Mario and Red Luigi. Not so much through direct character expressions, but more through how you play the game. Characters like Mario and Bowser prefer to just power through everything in their way without having to think too much about what to do next. Meanwhile, Luigi seems more like a critical thinker, using his potentially bigger brain to solve puzzles and fight enemies using unconventional, yet effective means. They usually aren't the most difficult puzzle to solve, but they still require thinking outside of the box. When you combine this with that jittery personality of his, it can be seen that Luigi is more cautious when he approaches an enemy. It's the simple touches to gameplay that make these characters have such distinct personalities. Then you have characters in the extended Mario universe. I can't believe that I'm saying the words extended Mario universe. The Mario fandom is weird as fuck. Wario isn't just greedy, but he's deceivingly smart. He's literally built multiple factories all by himself within presumably a few hours. And at one point, he built a time machine. Though I have been scouring the internet for days and I still have no idea what game that happened in, but can't you just take my word for it? While Wario's intellect and strength have frequently fluctuated from game to game, more often than not, he's a solid balance of brain and brawn. He just happens to be in games with characters that are smarter than him. Even the combat in games like the Wario Land series has much more visual emphasis on how you're smashing and bashing whatever enemies get between you and the treasure that you have to find. Also, you do know why Wario happens to be greedy, right? It's because he wants to have a castle of his own. A lot of people might not know this, but he kinda stopped obsessing over trying to actively beat Mario a long time ago, and focused on a career in treasure hunting instead. And sometimes making people play some cheap little video games. At least one of those. Then you have Donkey Kong and his family. There are some similar personality traits here and there, like the good guys are more down for a good time and the bad guys are secretly geniuses, but it's the way that the Kong family is set up that makes them stand out. Donkey Kong the Third's personality isn't just, "Hey, I'm a gorilla, don't touch my bananas!" I miss you, CJ. But he comes across as pretty dopey. And while he's known to be very proud of his awesome strength, he does enjoy and debatably prefer the quiet life on his island beach. At one point, he even started a pretty successful career as a traveling musician that eventually turns to a life of crime once all that fame gets to his head, but he eventually turns around and changes for the better thanks to the positive influence of his nephew and friends, including Mario, apparently. Speaking of his nephew, Diddy Kong can be described in several words: energetic, cheerful, childish, supportive, even peace-seeking. Contrary to Donkey Kong's more aggressive behavior, especially towards his enemies, Diddy doesn't feel the need to resort to violence so quickly. Dixie is in a similar way, but her similarities to Diddy Kong ironically make her stand out just as much as Diddy Kong, if not slightly more, because she comes across as rather tomboyish. Funky Kong is not only the cool guy who is all down and without my boy. Funky Kong isn't just a cool guy, but he might also be related to Donkey Kong in some fashion. Brother or even... Wait a minute. Oh my god! Wait a minute. Are we forgetting someone? Yes, we are forgetting someone! I can't believe we just blatantly forgot one of the most important characters in all of Donkey Kong! How could we possibly forget the one and only King K. Rool! Professional bad guy! Now keep in mind, King K. Rool as a character was low-key pulled right out of Rare's ass because they needed an original villain that wasn't Bowser. And apparently that wasn't Wario either. Still, he has a surprisingly high amount of depth as a character. He's a pirate, a genius, a boxer, and a king. Nope! That crown has no real meaning. Besides, he's already a pirate captain. What good even is a crown? You know, aside from throwing it at people, because fuck having a royal lifestyle and prestigious manners. So Mario characters are coded with personality, with much of it being painted within their design and how you play the game with them. Then again, Mario characters are probably not the best example of showcasing how Nintendo characters can have compelling personalities, since these characters are technically portrayed as actors in a unique setting with each game. What other franchises did Schaffrillas mention as not having fleshed out characters?
Zelda? Metroid?
Excuse me?
Samus is literally one of the most fleshed out Nintendo characters of all time. This is not up for debate. No. We're not here to condescend. We are here to inform. Samus is a bit of an interesting case because now we're introduced to a new kind of main character. One that is a silent protagonist that doesn't actively show emotion. This was done to make the player feel more like they're the one traversing these alien worlds. A fitting choice given the series' strong emphasis on sci-fi and atmosphere, but we can use this information to go back and analyze how the context of the world implies the character's personality. Samus is a bounty hunter, which means that she'd come across as brash, stone cold, and somewhat avaricious. She's also ready for this freaky alien shit that she keeps seeing in these worlds, so she's decked out with all sorts of weapons. And even with her power suit off, she is just as powerful of a character as her reputation speaks, just without all those cool weapons. Then again, this is probably the only thing that many mainstream gamers will be able to see. And I don't think that Schraff would deny being a mainstream gamer, especially since that apparently this game is what he considers to be the most underappreciated game of all time. Okay, I have a minimum of like 20 cases of beer for you to hold right now, but Metroid's lore makes Samus out to be much more than that. Samus witnessed her parents die at a young age, and since then has had to see all sorts of freaky alien shit. But over time, Samus's character began to develop, even going as far as to talk during her adventures. Even if it's all in text, Samus does do a good amount of talking, and it entices people on Samus's personality. And yeah, she is just as brash and stone cold as we'd expect her to be, but she also displays a lot of compassion, not just towards her fellow colleagues, but also to, yes, the baby. Because she witnessed this particular baby being born without a family, and instead of killing it on the spot like her normal bounty hunter self would do, she sympathized with it, so she decided to be the mother of this little Metroid. She's not just some strong, independent woman who don't need no man! She was given agency with a tragic backstory and a good heart with a nice little character arc thanks to the baby. And since I've mentioned the baby multiple times so far in the span of like a minute, I guess I should be talking about the other elephant in the room. In case you don't know why Metroid fans despise Other M so much to the point of supposedly referring to it as an outcast, it's not because they attempted to take Samus's character in a new direction, but because of the direction that they chose. I have no trouble believing that she'd be willing to work with other people, like the Galactic Federation. She expressed likings toward the Federation before, but it shouldn't be to the point of basically being entirely reliant on a stupid fucking command that is poorly handled in terms of story and even gameplay for some reason. Samus really did go from a strong badass that learned how to show compassion to allies and a few enemies, to some sort of tormented, whiny wench that isn't even remotely relatable to listen to. Honestly, the only reason why I don't actively detest this game is because the gameplay not only still feels like a Metroid game, but it's still really fun. Mostly. Also, I will defend the Ridley scene. I don't know what that whole PTSD shenanigan was supposed to be about, but Samus has every right to be scared or at least surprised to see a longtime nemesis that she personally killed just magically come back to life just because fuck you. Every other time that Ridley has come back to life, it's either been a genetic clone, experimentation, or as a cyborg, and Samus has known this, or at least was able to immediately recognize this. Even if this version of Ridley is a clone, it is damn close to the real thing. And Samus wasn't able to immediately tell whether or not this actually was the real Ridley. I don't care how thick-skinned Samus is. Who in their right mind wouldn't even wince with shock if people had to witness this? And Samus's reaction is even more justifiable to me when you consider Ridley's personality. Just like Samus, Ridley is one of those characters that can be immediately assumed by a single glance, but has more to him once you dig deeper in the game's lore. Ridley is known as the cunning god of death. Believe it or not, every single word in this title has significance in Ridley's personality, including the of. The cunning is an insight to Ridley's intelligence. He's not just some basic monster, he has a fairly high IQ, even being capable of speaking human languages. This is also represented in the fights with him, where he doesn't just try and scratch you like any other generic monster would, but he makes use of his tail and even his wings during battle. The god and death are referencing his dangerous power and his unquenchable bloodlust, both of which are represented in his relationship with Samus. Finally, the of is the conjunction that makes everything function together. Not only is he Samus's enemy, but the galaxy's enemy. Even with all this, there's still one more important trait that Ridley has that makes him as iconic as he is. Not only does he cause so much destruction and murder, but he has fun doing it. Having a twisted sense of humor is a very common trope for psychotic and bloodthirsty villains, but what makes Ridley stand out among the rest is that he has the appearance of a typical alien monster, so you wouldn't even expect someone like Ridley to outwit you. Don't judge the book by its cover, cause the book just might eat you. And I am eternally grateful that Sakurai was able to represent all of these aspects of Ridley when he finally became playable in Smash Ultimate. He could have easily just made Ridley play like another big heavy monster, cause in the context of Smash, he's done that twice before, but no. Every aspect of Ridley's personality is notably represented throughout his moveset, even his twisted smugness. From this stylish flip kick up smash, to this Sonic Adventure looking taunt, and to this victory animation where he smirks at the camera as he devours his defeated opponent, which doubles as a direct reference to the Metroid manga. Nice touch. Moving from sci-fi to fantasy, the Legend of Zelda series is another Nintendo franchise that Shafe mentioned as not having a lot of riveting characters. I must admit, I'm not as knowledgeable or interested in the Zelda lore as I should be. Twilight Princess and Hyrule Warriors are really the only Zelda games that I've played, and while I do like those games, there's still a library of classic games and modern hits that I'm clearly missing out on. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, Link is about as much of a blank slate as I'd expect him to be. Like with Samus, Link was intentionally made to be a silent protagonist to make the player feel like they were Link. Although unlike Samus, Link never really had the chance to truly express himself outside of a few instances where the player gets to choose what Link gets to say in a certain situation. But in my opinion, that doesn't count. But, you know who does have a layered personality? Every other named major character in the series. I mean, let's not ignore the various side characters that go through their own character arcs or the other villains that fill Ganon's role, but let's take a look at Ganondorf and Zelda themselves. I feel like an advantage that Zelda games have over other franchises is how characters like these can be reimagined in each game. Take a look at Zelda, for example. You do see her serious side more often than not, but other times you'll see her fun-loving side, or even her klutzy side. Sometimes these aspects of Zelda will be combined to create a new character entirely. Even Ganondorf gets this same treatment. He's always gonna be the demon king of evil or whatnot, but is he a mad king? Or is he a mad king? This is why these characters receive changes to their designs in each game. Then again, I'm not a Zelda fan, so maybe I'm missing a few things. However, there is another franchise that I'm very much aware of that perfectly represents what I mean by establishing a character's personality. Technically, I have two in mind, but the first one in particular gives only a little bit of information about the characters through minor biographies, but everything else is smartly woven through their character designs and their stats. This first game series that I have in mind is Fzero. No, seriously. You wouldn't know it, but Fzero's lore is shockingly bizarre. To be fair, Fzero as a series has never really had an opportunity to tell a story until F-Zero GX, and that one comic that came with the original game on the Super Nintendo. Everyone knows Captain Falcon at this point. He's another bounty hunter. He's the best F-Zero pilot there is, and he has a strong sense of justice. But what else can you say about the series if you haven't played the games? There's a bunch of freaky aliens, samurais who are actually gang members, superheroes, supervillains, robots, Mr. EAD, experiments, and a whole lot of what the fuck. All of which live in a single society. Chicago wishes it could be this diverse, but unfortunately the only life forms roaming around this town are criminals. A common comparison that these characters have are having vague backgrounds. No one knows where these misfits came from or what happened to them. But GX does give room for these characters to express themselves between the post-Grand Prix interviews and the unlockable character movies. And each character has a neat little background that explains why they became an F-Zero racer in the first place. These are pretty good at exploring the odd nature of these characters and all, but I will admit that I don't think GX's English voice cast does these characters justice. Not just because the voice acting is
I'm faster than any other racer out there!
bad, but the cast is entirely composed of like 8 people. Besides, I'd argue that the anime does a better job at fleshing out these characters anyway. But let's focus on the games for right now, as the games give several subtle signs of personality through the stats of each character's vehicle. Not only is EAD best girl, but those are the actual stats of its vehicle. Fitting pun, but might not be enough for character development. There are other characters that handle this better though, like Samurai Goro. Obviously he's a big, strong guy, and he's been holding a grudge against Falcon for the longest time, which translates into his machine having high durability and control, the latter of which matches the Blue Falcon's impeccable control by the way, but it's not the fastest machine due to its poor acceleration, which makes it slower than the Blue Falcon by default. Like how Falcon always beats Goro to the punch in terms of bounty hunting feats. And as we see in the interviews, he's very full of himself, often referring to himself in the third person, and supposedly not giving a hoover damn about his own gang members. But, fun fact, he has a son? And his name is Daigoro? Oh my gosh, that's so cute! This kid is actually adorable! I love him! Not in that way, however. Oh, and look, the stats of his vehicle spell out dead. Like the father he looks up to, despite constantly belittling him and calling him fat. I'd go over the other characters in the game, but we don't have all night, so let's just focus on the other main racers. Pico is an especially unique case because he's a former military veteran turned local shop owner by day, and a senile hitman by night. In fact, his own psychotic nature and reckless driving were rumored to almost cancel the F-Zero Grand Prix years before the events of GX. This doesn't elicit a character arc, but if we take a look at Pico's profile movie, which is the only one that doesn't make the character look like a complete buffoon, he's going through a shooting practice session where he shoots cardboard cutouts of shady figures and trying not to shoot the cutouts of civilians. Then, it cuts to where he presumably has to shoot this one civilian cutout, but he shoots right above the head, because Black Shadow's head was on the other side of that cutout. No, this isn't some sort of hidden sense of justice, as his Grand Prix interviews debunk that idea entirely. But now we know that he became an F-Zero pilot as a means of controlling his unquenchable bloodlust. But while Pico is an enigma, he's not so much a developed character. At least not in the sense where he goes through an arc or whatever. Very much unlike Dr. Stewart, which you can definitely say much more about him as a character. He's a licensed doctor, he's cool-headed, and he's a ladies' man. Not to mention, he has a rather compelling background. Not only is he an incredible surgeon, having helped countless of hundreds of patients and not a single one dying on his watch, but he became an F-Zero pilot following the death of his own father, who was also Racer number 3. In fact, he's probably the only one of the main 4 characters that races for his own honor. And this might be stretching things a bit, but I feel like that scarf is a symbol of the people that have helped him cope with the loss of his father. I mean, he claims that that scarf is a symbol of friendship, so take what you will out of that. I just wish that the voice actors were able to bring these characters to life, because these guys just aren't doing it. But remember, I did say that there were 2 Nintendo franchises that build character personalities through gameplay.
It's still not Pokemon, stop it!
But I'll give you a hint. It features James McCloud. I shouldn't even laugh about that. That's mean. But yeah, it's Star Fox.
Open the wings!
You wanna know why Star Fox is so fucking awesome? Is it because we're playing as furries that shoot everything in front of them? Is it because of barrel roll? Well, yes. But I highly doubt that Star Fox 64 would be such an iconic relic of Nintendo's history if the Star Fox team wasn't so richly developed through the most bare minimum of gameplay. If Fzero was able to subtly establish character personalities through in-game stats, Star Fox 64's entire gameplay is the story and characters. Later games did adopt the use of traditional cutscenes, but all that characterization was built entirely off of how Star Fox 64 allowed the Star Fox team to express themselves in a way that very few games have been able to do. Fox himself is one of the strongest protagonists of any Nintendo game. He's headstrong and responsible, but his high confidence can cause him to steer away from his regulations at times. Many people can say that his personality resembles Luke Skywalker, especially given the youthful dialect in his voice. Thankfully, Fox isn't just furry Luke Skywalker, not just because his development is different from that of Luke's, but also because Fox has to grow as a leader, and he wants to be like his father, James McCloud. Meanwhile, the way that your partners behave in battle and how they interact with Fox is what fleshes out those characters. Slippy always has to be saved because, well, he's not really a fighter. He's more of a mechanic. He's a little on the slow side of fighting, but he's still necessary to the team. Peppy is sort of like Fox's mentor, because he used to be on the original Star Fox team led by Fox's father, and eventually he encouraged Fox to take on the role as the new leader of Star Fox. And thus he also has all sorts of advice to give, from do a barrel roll! No! Meanwhile, Falco's personality is probably the most evident in terms of gameplay. Despite being on a team, he prefers to do things his own way, which is why Falco tends to guide Fox through shortcuts and alternate paths. I feel like this game specifically helped these characters to be fleshed out even further in later installments. While Fox has mostly stayed the same in each game, everyone else has either had their personalities developed or at least elaborated on. In Assault, Slippy learns to toughen up and fight on the battlefield, going from "Fox, save me!" to "No mercy!" And he's actually a good fighter this time around. Wow! Falco still acts like the hot-headed loner of the Star Fox team, even abandoning the team for most of adventures, like how he kept abandoning his orders in Star Fox 64, which was already an extreme take on when Fox did the very same thing. I also feel like Star Fox Command had a lot of interesting takes on handling each character, taking the characters in a new direction that didn't actively try to destroy everything that the characters stood for. Whether or not you like this direction of storytelling, I'd argue that it did a lot more good for the characters than not. Peppy retiring his R-Wing while still watching over the Star Fox team, Slippy being in a relationship, Falco actually suffering consequences for going off on his own, and Fox trying to grow a relationship with Crystal, who is considering joining Starwolf because of her gripes with Fox's leadership. Now, I am aware that some people didn't like Command's story, and even I can admit that some aspects are pretty cheesy, but first of all, and second, I stand that Fox's decision to boot Crystal from the team was unjustified, but at least it's believable. Assault really developed their relationship, and at some point, Fox was gonna get worried that Crystal was gonna go get herself killed, and given his feelings for her, he obviously didn't want that to happen. I'm not saying that this doesn't have its flaws, as the problem is that this arc is given way too much attention in-game, and I'd probably need to make an entire video on Command's story as a whole. But does it really surprise you that there's drama between the two in the first place? Even then, Wolf is probably the best character anyway. No, not just in the game, I'm talking about in Star Fox as a whole. While Star Fox's protagonists have always been very strong, the same can't really be said for the antagonists. Oh, don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about Andross. He's consistently been amazing, even in games that he isn't physically present in. But General Scales was wasted potential, the Anglars were pretty unmemorable, and the Aperoids, while intimidating enough, weren't really that much more than just another alien race. That is, until the final fight with the Aperoid Queen, but in the end, they're still just a bunch of aliens. Then there's the Starwolf team. They started off as the perfect antithesis to the Star Fox team, and it was well crafted in both of their boss fights, being subtly demonstrated through their personalities, dialogue, behaviors, and even lore. Over the course of the next few games, Wolf began to respect Fox and his team, and I think I know where that all came from. Yes, a part of it comes down to considering Star Fox to be a worthy adversary, but I think that Wolf's new perspective can also be attributed to his volatile experiences leading a team of mercenaries. Pigma eventually betrayed the Starwolf team like the swine ball he is, and Andrew got booted off the team for his constant bragging and poor piloting skills. Wolf then had to hire a new member entirely in the form of Panther Caroso. Plus, while Star Fox would frequently have their efforts recognized by the Cornerian army, Starwolf never had much success in their bounty hunting. This has led to Wolf growing a grudging respect for Fox given that his experiences in leading a team have been much better, even going as far as to assist Fox multiple times. It's not even a whole enemy of my enemy sort of thing. He does it because a part of him wants to. Now, this isn't to say that they've become better friends. They're not friends, and they never will be. But Wolf has started to become a little softer around Fox, even briefly filling in the role of Fox's mentor a few times. This is best demonstrated in Star Fox Assault, where he gives the ever so iconic line,
Don't hesitate. When the time comes, just act.
Which is already a clever spin on the very same line that Peppy and James have both said to Fox before. I'd like to see where the series could take these two now that Star Fox has been rebooted. Unfortunately, we may never get to see any more cool additions to Star Fox because according to Nintendo... God fucking damn it. Well, I think that's every single game I wanted to talk about.
Oh, but what about Pokemon? That game series is
Bad? You're right, it is. Of course I knew that. People are talking about how the modern Pokemon games might not be that good, but hot take of the night, I'd argue that Pokemon was never good. Listen, every other JRPG is objectively better in every conceivable way, including the imitation JRPGs like Kingdom Hearts and Fire Emblem. But y'all ain't ready for that conversation because you're too busy letting nostalgia completely blind you to the actual quality of Pokemon. Because every single mainline Pokemon game has never been anything more than basic, boring, simple-minded fodder. That being said, I'm not just gonna pretend that compelling characters and stories don't exist in this series, because they absolutely do. Yes, the main character will forever be a silent protagonist, and the villains are still just another gang of baddies. But a bunch of other characters have received unique personalities and even some character arcs here and there. For example, your rival isn't just a whole,
I'm better than you. I use the starter that beats yours. Smell you later, punk.
Characters like N have become fan favorite characters for good reason. And like with Fzero, many of the actual Pokemon are characterized by their stats, types, and designs. Fairy types are cute, dark types are edgy, fighting types are respectable warriors, and ghost types are ominous and mischievous. And let's not forget the Pokédex giving a brief bio of every single Pokemon. I may find the Pokemon games to be boring, but it's important to give credit to where credit is due. When Nintendo wants to add compelling personalities to their characters and stories, they are damn good at doing so. No matter how these characters are handled, Nintendo wants to prioritize gameplay over story and characters. There's no reason to pretend that this isn't the case. But if someone like Schaffrillas Productions were to ask, do Nintendo characters have compelling personalities? I think it's important to remember why Nintendo characters are so iconic in the first place. Even with their stance on gameplay coming first, Nintendo has put in many efforts to flesh out their characters, whether it be by building off of their design, basing them off of the context of the world around them, elaborating on them through regular gameplay, or by making unique interpretations of these characters, whether they had an emphasis on story or not. Even if you don't like these games, the efforts are still there. You don't just accidentally create some of the most iconic things in entertainment. And next you're going to comment that those are merely blue curtains, you dumbass! Just so you know, not only is English another one of my 3 majors, but that one in particular has a concentration in creative writing. So therefore, I am a blue curtain scholar. Music composition is my 3rd major, in case you were wondering. That said, I know when to open those blue curtains every once in a while to see if there's anything behind them. And if you did so in this case, then you would know that Miyamoto had many plans for fleshing out Mario's personality. The Mario that he originally envisioned was very different from the Mario we know and love today. He wanted Mario to be a character that anyone could relate to, rather than this elementary school-esque character. And while he eventually accepted the changes made to the character, he still had plenty of influence over his design, such as the ban of the peace sign. Go look it up, it's a very interesting story. On the other hand, there's a character like Donkey Kong, the 3rd. Remember, Cranky Kong is the original Donkey Kong, and then it's Junior, and then it's this one. When Rare sent Miyamoto their reimagining of Donkey Kong, Miyamoto did like the redesign a lot, but he said that Donkey Kong didn't look stupid enough, which is why he wears a tie. The fact that anyone at Nintendo made any sort of careful design choices at all shows to me that there's more thought put into these simple characters than what we would think. Nintendo is always going to be different from other companies, and regardless of some of their decisions, or their unpleasable fans, Nintendo's not stupid. Video games have had an advantage of using unconventional means of telling a story, and Nintendo has understood this for a very long time. If that wasn't the case, then they wouldn't be equally capable of making compelling stories such as Fire Emblem, Xenoblade Chronicles, Golden Sun, and yes, Kid Icarus Uprising. Many people will prefer these traditional methods of storytelling. Heck, to a degree, I'm one of those people. But, time after time, Nintendo has shown to us that there's more than one way for a game to tell a story and flesh out its characters. So, thanks for taking the time out of your day to watch this video all the way to the end. Now you're free to express your opinion on this video in any way you see fit, whether that be leaving a like, a dislike, or dropping a comment down below letting me know what you think about Nintendo's characters. Did this video justify your love for these characters even further? Were you at least able to keep an open mind and find new respect for them? Or do you think that these are just simple characters that don't have any value or real personality? Either response is valid, because as Schaffrillas says, opinions are valid. And speaking of which, in the extremely low chance that you're watching this, first of all, hey. Second of all, do yourself a favor and go play a Tails game. Just make sure it isn't Zestiria. I don't need you making that mistake. Third of all, I didn't make this video to shit all over your opinion, but this point you made in your Kid Icarus Uprising video sparked an interesting conversation that I feel should be talked about more often. If anything, this was just a disagreement to someone that I feel has a lot of insightful things to say and is mostly right with his opinions from my perspective. That's the thing about these video essays. Given their usual length, at some point you're gonna say something that another person disagrees with to a point where it's worth talking about. And maybe that's the case for my video as well. But hey, if you want to see more video essays from me anyway, or talk more about some of the things I've said, then why not click the subscribe button, click the bell next to it, and check out the rest of my channel while you wait for my next video. Maybe even follow my social media if you'd like to, links below. And with all that said, I hope that the rest of your day is absolutely wonderful, and I will see you when I feel like it.